everyone. You're in meeting room C. We are here for Sankofa, Rethinking Growing Food in the South. And I am excited to introduce Obiora Embry and Irucka Embry. I have known Obiora for years and years, and I want to give a plug for his hickory syrup. If anyone has the opportunity to source some from him, I highly recommend it. And they have a really interesting story about family land and family legacy of land stewardship, and so I'm excited that we get to hear this from them today. In a minute here, I'm going to pass out these bright orange comment cards. Please fill these out. It's very important. And also have a handout from Obiora and Irucka for us for today. If you have questions during the session, please raise your hand and let one of us bring you a microphone. This session is being recorded, and this makes it a more valuable recording for anyone who is listening later. I will turn this over to you all.
Good afternoon. My name is Obiora Embry.
Good afternoon. My name is Irucka Embry. And so we'll start with a little bit of our backstory. In terms of our backstory, both our mother and our father had family farms that have been in our families for over 100 years apiece.
And the main farm we're going to talk about today is Martin Acres. There's our family farm, maternal family farm in Western Kentucky. And it's been our family for over 150 years, 8th generation farm, family farm. And the total acreage of the farm right now is about 731 acres. In its heyday, it was 1,500 acres.
Okay, so who am I? I am who am I? I'm a multifaceted, eclectic person. I am an environmental engineer. I'm a data analyst. I am an activist that's ecologically based in terms of economic, social, and also environmental. I'm also a photographer. I'm a publisher. I'm a hip-hop musician. I'm a lot of different things. In terms of my background that really relates to farming, by me being an environmental engineer, I have had over 10 classes in microbiology. Took looking at soil microbiology because we use microorganisms to degrade, aka to mediate, to clean up waste in the air, in the water, and also in the land.
And I, Obiora, have a BS degree in industrial engineering, which is basically systems engineering. I started growing food as an adult about 2003, 2004. And I'm my brother, multifaceted person. I'm an author, photographer, and also too, as Lisa had mentioned, I make value-added products, and so one of them is hickory syrup, and also I am a person, I guess, who brings to Art Collective not just system engineering thinking, but also just appreciation for nature, as well as to a person who likes to talk to plants.
Okay, this slide I titled Dispelling the Myths. We have been told as human beings a lot of myths. The first one I have up there is that human beings have only done harm to the earth. And that's with regards to the way of agriculture, which I'll get into that myth a little later in the slides. But basically, out of all the myths up here, how many of you have heard any of these myths? Please raise your hand. Okay, so roughly probably half of you. So basically, through our talk today, we're going to be dispelling these myths little by little. Some may be through our talking, some may be through the quotes document that you have in your hands.
And Sankofa is Asante Adinkra symbol. That means go back and get it. Or go back and fetch what has been forgotten. And
That's the symbol right there.
And basically it's a swan, as you can see, with an egg pointed backwards. And that's part of what we're talking about today, is trying to not reinvent the wheel, so to speak, because we know that everything's already been done, everything under the sun has already been done. So nothing new is being done by us, everybody else. And so part of the history we talk about today is going to be about the Gamo in Ethiopia, as Mike had mentioned earlier today too, about F.H. King, Farmers of 40 Centuries, that's Asia, Indigenous North American Agriculture, Root Stout, and also Dr. George W. Carver.
Okay, with the Gamo, some important things to say about them. They live in Ethiopia in the southern region. They live in a landscape roughly that's 13,000 feet above sea level. It's roughly 62 miles by 18 miles wide. Well, 62 miles long by 18 miles wide. This area is devoid of roads, and at one point in time, including to the 80s and 90s, they had over 6 million people in this area, but yet they were not hungry. They didn't have famine like they had in the rest of Ethiopia. And most importantly to me is that they've been farming on the same land for 10,000 years. That right there shows that agriculture is a system of growing food, of growing culture. Our spirit did not start out bad. It was morphed into what I call now deaf agriculture rather than industrial agriculture over the last few hundred years. Other things about the Gamo, they grow over 65 varieties of barley, over 12 varieties of wheat, over 100 varieties of insect, and then dozens of varieties of cassava, taro, and yam. Also, they grow aroma potatoes.
And
so
insect, for people that don't know, is a perennial banana, but the Latin name is insect.
And so basically the whole point is they grow an eclectic polyculture. That's the key, is to grow a true biodiverse cropping system. Okay, in terms of the indigenous in North America, the different systems that existed here, both in the past, also to the current day. So you have Chinapas, you have the Three Sisters, agroforestry, and then you have, from Hawaii, you have Awapua. And certain things that we thought were new to regenerative agriculture we'll see are not new, like the companion planting, the Three Sisters, doing the intercropping, doing the controlled burning, doing fertilizing. What they fertilized was they either used human waste, they buried that next to the crops they're going to grow, or if they're around a river where they had fish or a lake or whatever, they may use the fish bodies, bury that as a fertilizer. So the Chinapas mostly were like in modern day Mexico, Mexico City, for example, which is below sea level. And so because they had the wetlands there that flooded, they decided why not create a floating island of food to grow. That way you just float along, it requires less manual labor, you don't have to have animals, and you use what's there in your local microclimate. Okay. The Three Sisters that you see there, that's a photograph from a person in Arizona. There they have Hopi blue corn, pole beans, and then sugar pumpkins. And this is at an elevation of 6,000 feet above sea level. Okay. This picture, though it's a modern day, is basically shown to show what used to happen with agroforestry, particularly in the Pacific Northwest. They would burn existing forests or whatever to either clear out animals, so they would be easier to hunt, or to clear out underbrush that they did not want there. But one thing that's very important is that currently certain states and the federal government have asked the Native Americans that live on reservations in those areas to take over the forest management of national forests that are near their reservations, because they do a whole lot better job of managing the forest than we have. Because they dealt with that system over thousands of years, doing controlled burning, for example, that the elites of Europe told the poor people of Europe, whatever, took in the feudal areas, the serfs basically, controlled burning is what primitive people do. So don't do that anymore. You want to be modern. So you don't burn anymore. That's one thing that we have forgotten as people, is that natural processes, flooding, fires, they're needed for regrowth and regeneration.
And then in Farmers of 40 Centuries by F.H. King, which was published posthumously after he passed, he went to China, Korea, Japan, also I believe Malaysia, and basically they were growing on food in the same fields for 4,000 years. And they did some things to what's done by the Gamo, as well as by indigenous people here in North America. And for them also, one thing they did was basically, they had a system of collecting waste basically from all the villages. And that basically was distributed back to the farmers to be used in the fields. And also too, they used green manure and compost, and also the intercropping of cover crops with cash crops. So again, the whole idea of what we're talking about is something is universal to basically agriculture as it was in the past. And the root stout was an octogenarian who basically was kind of a big expression to me as I started trying to look at different ways of growing food, basically by just doing less work. And okay, you can look at it as working smarter, not harder. One thing she was really about though was trying to minimize the amount of work that's required to grow food. So one thing she did though was to have 8 inches of any type of vegetable matter put on the ground, let it decompose, put the seeds inside there. And part of the reason for that is that, for one, you have to water less often, and then also the seeds are able to grow inside the environment that allows them to have less competition from other vegetation, and then two, they kind of come up when they're ready. And basically the whole goal right there is to increase organic matter over time. And Dr. George W. Carver, reason why I say W. Carver, because he doesn't know his middle name. His given name, Washington, but at Iowa State University, working his master's degree. To separate him from another black guy in master's degree program, also by the name of Dr. George Carver. But part of his childhood, though, was so different from other people, is that he was actually formally educated. His parents both were enslaved, and I do believe that he was enslaved too for part of time also. They had both passed, and so he spent most of his childhood out in nature, in the woods, observing, watching, and just kind of being one with the Creator, as what he called it. And even went to Tuskegee University. He went there, and most of the time he went there, most of the time that he went out into what he called his lab, he went out to the forest to go explore. And he told him, and he asked the Creator, "Dear Creator, help me learn the secrets of the plants." And also too, and for the South in particular, that's where he was based at, in Alabama. He would have the Jessup wagon, which would go around to the local, both black and poor farmers to try to teach them about ways of farming in a way that did not continue to encourage that. That time period that he was talking to them was when it was after, it was before Jim Crow laws, but after the ending of, official ending of chattel slavery, and so basically people were still doing sharecropping. And so it's kind of a way he's trying to talk to them about trying to find ways to use already what's on your land. To talk about go to the swamps near you, take the swamp muck, and use that as compost on your farms. Also too, but of course, as most people know about using peanuts, the reason why I mention peanuts because, like most legumes, they're just fixated with nitrogen to the soil. And so it's all about basically trying to utilize what nature already has provided for you versus going out spending money on fertilizers, which is still done today, sadly.
And one thing I want to add to that is that the Chinapa system could be used around the Mississippi River system where you have the wetlands that, rather than dredging the wetlands, why not, even bogs, as they call them elsewhere, why not do a Chinapa system? We have floating, literally garden beds.
We also encourage too eating wild foods, often labeled as weeds, and also to talk about relationships of all, basically of God's creation, and the symbiosis of basically everything that will be connected. All my relations, everything's connected. And also too, people know about him, he's got over 300 fungi species. And the part there too is tied to basically, again, we're talking about too, is trying to create better soil. A lot of that means that we have to increase the fungal diversity of the soil, which actually in turn helps the plants to be healthier, and also too, it keeps basically this disease down, because basically most people who farm in bacteria-dominant soils, which is part of the reason why there's so many problems of pests, also diseases. And then Martin Acres is in Mulberry County, which is here, and probably about right here on the map. It's one of the, I guess, smaller cities in Mulberry County, and it's
that's enough. Yeah. Well, this map basically show you where we're at now in Frankfort and where our farm is at, our mother's family farm.
And our great-great-great-grandfather, Roosevelt Martin, had purchased himself out of enslavement in 1833. I'm sorry, he was born in 1833, but outside of enslavement in 1850. He purchased land from his former enslavement master, and then some of that land was purchased by my great-grandfather in 1940s, where he passed. And it's in the Road Chapel community of Greenville, Kentucky. And the farm itself was still a continuous farming operation to about 1986. And what my brother and I are trying to do is trying to resurrect our farming heritage on our farm.
And one thing I want to add to that is that our great-great-grandfather told his master, I want to remain in enslavement for a few more years so I can buy out my wife, Vinnie, buy her freedom as well. Okay. This thought here is about various scientific principles. One is waste equals food, whether it be the waste from a tree. When a tree falls, it gets broken down by the macroorganisms and then the microorganisms, whether it be the fungi. So therefore, waste equals food, even in our bodies. In terms of all life, whatever, it goes back to what Professor Béchamp said, who was a contemporary of Louis Pasteur at the time. but he talked about the microzymas, meaning in Latin, tiny ferments, because they did fermentated processes, which produces alcohol, amongst other things. He determined that the microzymas were the root of all life. Every cell, every tissue, every bacteria, fungi, doesn't matter, they create them. They're pleomorphic, which means that they change their form based off of the condition, the environment they're in. And the other thing that's a scientific principle is the cycles. Everything is a loop, it's a cycle. Okay, in terms of agroforestry, we started out 10 years ago deciding to do an edible forest garden because I learned about the GAMO, which I mentioned earlier, and also had I heard a talk by Dave Jackie talking about agroforestry in temperate climates. And so basically, I heard the talk that night at a church that I used to go to that had every Wednesday night, whether it be presentations, movies about sustainability. So I called up Obiora, I was in graduate school at that time, and I said, hey dude, heard about this right here, we're gonna do this on the farm. We talked about having the yield of agriculture, but using forestry principles, using trees, using perennial agriculture. And so the next spring or whatever, early spring, we went out to the farm to look at 2 acres of land to start doing this dream. Because we wanted to resurrect our farming heritage and do what we call the right way, using what's called biological agriculture.
And then the red here is kind of approximate our 2 acres right here. And as you see to the east of us, well, this area is north of, people don't know, but basically it's, we lease about 230 acres or so of land to a neighboring farm who grows on there in rotations, soybeans and corn. As you can tell, the difference already kind of in the beginning, that basically happened here, probably bare soil, and over here you have a mixture of bare soil, also too, vegetation too as well. And then also too, we're bordered by, in the north, by northeast by forest, as well as too, a little bit of the eastern side, and also too much of the south too is forest. And then we first arrived in March 2013. This basically is how our 2 acres looked. We had a cousin who was hired by our great uncle to come and bulldoze the area, and so in doing so, he created 2 brush piles. That's the brush pile in the south, and this was kind of in the south too as well, bordered by eastern red cedars primarily in this southern forest. And there's also a creek that runs through part of that area too as well. In 2013, I had read The Holistic Orchard, Tree Fruits and Berries a Biological Way by Michael Phillips. And in doing so, that helped me kind of think about agriculture in a different way. We oftentimes call industrial agriculture conventional. It's not conventional. It's non-biological. And then also too, I learned too though that the soil that we had inherited was bacterial dominant. The reason why that was so important to us that we heard many years though, growing up by our family farm, about how there was so much bottomland on the farm. Because they said that on the, in the whole county, some of the best land that is there is owned by us. And so that's why so many people want to come to our farm to grow food there, because they know that not only do they have hot water tables there on the farm, also too, the soil there is supposed to be really, really good. But the reason why I knew that it was bacteria dominant, because when we first got there, we saw a lot of, what I thought initially was raspberries, but actually blackberries. And he said in the book, though, that typically if you have bacterial-dominant soil, you have typically a lot of raspberries that are growing wild. The reason why we wanted to have a fungal-dominant soil was that I knew that from reading his book that if you have a mature forest, the dominant microorganism in the soil will be fungi. And so, very beginning, we sowed native seeds for both pollinators, quail, deer, and wild turkeys, which run abundant on the farm. We also planted early fruit trees that were moved in 2014.
And one thing about the planting of the fruit trees was that we started out feeding the microbiology in the soil. In our mix of spring water, we had in there kelp, unsulfured blackstrap molasses, organic banana yogurt, banana peels, and what else?
Oat groats.
So basically, we're feeding both the bacteria and the fungi. Like I said, my background is environmental engineering, and so my master's degree program, we did a lot with feeding the microbes, took the bacteria to degrade waste. And so one of the things that we had in the lab was blackstrap unsulfured molasses. So that told me, hey, Obiora, when you add this here to the mix.
And so very beginning, 2013, November, this is some of the fruit trees they put in. Our initial idea was try to put a forest garden in a certain part of the forest, a certain part of our 2 acres. In 2014, we decided to try to do something a little bit different. So we clear cut the grass, left it to decompose. And the reason right there is that we know that in trying to increase the soil fertility, we need to have more stuff decomposing. Instead of taking the grass and removing it, we left it there. And also, too, we put more branches, left it decomposed too, and then sowed native seeds and buckwheat as a cover crop. And this is my brother I mentioned earlier. This right here are some of the trees we got from the Division of Forestry here in Kentucky. And they were in the ground, healed in, for over a year. And one of my cousins told me, too, that something we couldn't do because the trees are going to die.
And that right there goes back to another, the mythos, too, though, is that ourselves and individuals and collectively we're breaking mythos, tell people, basically the quote, the proverb in China.
What's it?
Basically about...
You should not stand in the way, hold on.
Basically,
It is those who say it cannot be done, should not stand in the way of those who are doing it.
Thank you.
Those who say it cannot be done should not stand in the way of those doing it. This right here shows the living soil progression as we try to, again, improve the soil. At the very beginning, you could tell it's a really light colored soil, but over time, because what we're doing, it got darker and darker. And the whole goal, basically, of what we're trying to do is trying to create fertile soil. Of course, the darker it is, though, means the more nutrients are inside the soil, as well as, too, the healthier it is. As you can tell, too, from the early pictures, there's almost no earthworms at all in the soil, no type of microorganisms. But as time went on, we started seeing more earthworms, roly-polies, caterpillars, millipedes, spiders too, that kind of started to be in the soil. And this right here shows what I referred to earlier with the hildin trees. As you can see, they're alive still. They're full of leaves, and none of them died. And that's the whole point, basically, of, again, the whole idea of people saying something can't be done. It can be done. In November 2014, we were smushed by a friend of mine who was part Yaqui, and also my brother had a dowser, and we went around basically the perimeter of our 2 acres to try to add back to it a sense of spirituality. And part of the reason for that there is that we know that in growing food, as was mentioned earlier today by Mike about Rudolf Steiner, there's a spirituality to growing food. And part of that too is be connected to something greater than yourself. And so we welcome the spirits that existed on Martin Acres long before our family was enslaved there. Part of the farm too that Martin Acres is now on, my great-great-grandfather was enslaved on. And so, again, so you have so much history there, as well as too, there's people who were there too as well before we arrived. So we want to try to invoke those spirits as part of what we're trying to do too is heal the land, also heal our family too. In 2015, we added crushed brown eggshells. Recent fact there is that we tried to increase the calcium inside the soil to help with the cation exchange. We also transplanted more native trees, created a mountain culture, a hugo culture, in the northern part of the 2 acres, sowed more heirloom seeds, got some native seeds, and also we added composite sod to the barren areas, and then sod dressed with ancient forest humus, azomite, Epsom salt solution to increase the magnesium in the soil, also to the micronutrients too. This right here shows a picture of the hugo culture. Inside there, I put in whitened cotton, cardboard, leaves, decaying branches for the forest, and that right there now is covered by 2022 by a wide variety of native plants. But basically, again, just trying to build back up the soil in different ways, and knowing too that because the hyphae of a fungi can travel for miles. So basically, even though it's on one part of the soil, we know that there will eventually spread throughout the rest of it. Actually, too, basically, in 2 years, because what we was doing, we went from having primarily barren soil to having a variety of plants, primarily native plants still growing. Also, too, you saw at the very beginning, too, some of the trees, particularly Eastern red cedars that were on the farm, are now, they were dying and looking pretty bad at the very beginning, but now they're fuller, growing taller, as well as the trees, too, right here as well. Now, again, it's part of what we're trying to do, is just trying to do something different. Some people don't understand what we're doing. People always kind of see, okay, they're the twins, the guys with the trees. Yes, that is true. That's a small part of what we're doing, but overall, though, we're building up an ecosystem that actually is going to be self-sustaining. It is self-sustaining, I should say, rather. In 2016, we did more cover crops, native seeds, heirloom seeds, aerated some areas with a pitchfork. I sprayed what I made then liquid one fertilizer. It basically was a fertilizer I made fermenting white yarrow leaves, horsetail, comfrey, I think also stingnail too as well. The reason for that there is that basically it helps to diversify the bacteria inside the soil, and also then too, some of the stuff I added to it also was trying to also increase the fungi inside the soil too as well. With it too, outside Epsom salt, and Epsom salt, the reason why we add that there is that magnesium is to plants as iron is to humans. Only difference between basically plants and humans is that inside of our cellular walls is that they have magnesium instead we have iron, which means then that basically humans are to a certain extent walking plants. And so by trying to increase the magnesium side of the soil, in turn helps the plants become healthier, also increases the vascular structure of the plants too as well.
And one thing I'll add to that is that because of my background with microbiology, the cell walls of bacteria, they're very similar to the cell walls of plants and human beings. That's what asking the question over the years with pesticides, okay? They're only supposed to be killing certain organisms, but yet our cell walls are very similar. That's beyond the fact that most pesticides, particularly organophosphates, came out of World War II or either World War I to kill people. Okay, and so in 2016, we decided to do a soil test. We sent to CSI Crop Services International Incorporated, because we wanted to do a biological analysis of the soil. And so basically the baseline is the area that's fallow to the west of our 2 acres.
In 2017, we had more decomposing leaves, sawdust. Again, sawdust was basically to help with fungi, crushed peanut shells, crushed eggshells, and cardboard. And also, too, we did more elm seeds, transplanted blueberries, more native plants, also more healing plants, too. 2018, more native seedlings, American ginseng 2 seeds too, inside the forest. Again, we're trying to develop ecosystem. So part of the southern forest, I have put in half a pound American ginseng seeds. In the northern forest, I put in, goat silk also. And again, a whole lot there is trying to diversify what we have going on the farm. I also had still-cut oats, which again to feed the fungi, and also my brother did BD501 silica.
And I'll add to that probably, I guess in 2014, I added to the southern forest golden seal rhizome and also the ginseng rhizome. Either the deer ate them, the mice did, because I don't know, because they never showed it in growth.
And then 2019, we transplanted more native plants, broadcast native seeds, added BD, bird compost, humus compost, and BD500. And they're basically are again tied to Rudolf Steiner biodynamic agriculture too as well.
Yeah, the native seeds basically is a wide mix of different seeds that we've been broadcasting over the years. Okay, and so in 2019 we did another test again, the same thing. The western barren area, fallow area, not 2 acres.
And you see this right here too as well, the fungi has gone up, as well as to the bacteria. And the whole goal eventually is to have the fungi be well over 50%.
And so I was gonna do a soil test again around November this past year. I didn't, but I will be doing it again this year though to show the improvement in our 2 acres. And the baseline really is no longer a baseline because over the last year, the people he talked about that leased the land from us, they took over that area as well though and made it into their cornfield.
One thing also they're trying to work on is increase the amount of beneficial nematodes. I bought some last year from a company, I can't remember the name of it right now, in New England, beneficial nematodes that put our 2 acres was to adjacent land too as well.
So in the blue right here, you have our 2 acres, and basically this aerial image I think was between 2017 and 2019, and you see the greater cover of vegetation.
And one thing that too, reason for that there is that the former manager for J.I. Rodale's farm in Pennsylvania, I can't think of his name right now, I met him at Southern Sog in 2012, I do believe. He had a quote. He said, "Soil is like an Olympic athlete. You can't expect to take off 3 months of the year before its peak." He said that basically having bare soil is detrimental to the health of the ecosystem trying to develop. And so the reason right there is that means that's part of the reason why we try to keep stuff growing all year round, as well as 2, trying to keep the less land bare. And part of it right there too is that the winter time in the fall is when the soil is most biologically active.
And one thing I want to add about that with the bare soil, some bare soil is good because certain solitary bees, in particular they're native, require bare soil to create their home.
And then the last 2 years, one thing we have to try to do is trying to increase the diversity of what we have growing on our 2 acres. And you see some pictures too later on though about some of the stuff that we have growing, native plants primarily. So we put a lot more native seeds in, and right now we have it so that most of our 2 acres has different type of zones, in the sense that instead of trying to have, so we have 2 acres, we're gonna grow one thing on there, each part of it has different type of environment. And so building, I think, a resilient ecosystem, you have to understand and realize that we have to match the plants to the environment. And so doing so, in the southern part, it's a lot more shaded. So that part there, we have a lot more shade-tolerant plants. The northern part is a lot more sunnier. And the brush piles, I have in the southern one, have primarily herbs. Also, too, another one that have a lot of annuals. So ginger, turmeric, garlic, also too different greens going in the southern part, and the northern part of the brush pile. This here shows too, I'm talking about with the northern brush pile, the taller stalks right here, that is garlic that I put in last fall, I'm sorry, November 2021. And then here y'all see too, chicory growing, y'all see there too, poker right there, and then there's some trees that's still standing. Those right there are sumac trees. I do believe smooth sumac right there, and a few trees too as well. The whole point right there is that basically you have biodiversity of plants, which means then it's increasing the biodiversity of the microorganisms inside the soil, and also too, some of the garlic that we have planted here, some of the bulbs that we harvest them, almost as big as my fist. The whole point there is that basically you want to have a wide variety of things growing to help increase, help one too, it helps also too, one thing we didn't mention so far is that people often ask us, how often do we water our 2 acres? We don't, for the most part. The basic water that gets though here is from rainwater or just from having high water tables. But what you can tell too, we research about you have to water garlic at least one inch of water a week. We had a drought last year that affected most of I think Kentucky. It's just I do believe before the drought, after the drought. I can't recall exactly the timeline, but even after the drought though, the garlic though, our 2 acres, most of our 2 acres though, was still green and lush, and also very colorful, compared to basically the corn being grown on the adjacent land.
And one thing I'll add too about the soil is that when you have the optimal amount of organic matter content, that you have the available water in the soil for you. Okay. So basically, what we're doing is we are reimagining food in terms of pathways here in the South, whether it be creating food, aka value-added products, the dishes that we make from the food, as well as growing of the food, using the foods that used to be used as foods, whether it be pine needles, for example. That was probably the key to stopping the scurvy, not citrus fruits for those that traveled back and forth between what became the Americas and Europe.
And for sure though too, you'll see that over 30,000 plant species worldwide are considered edible by humans. 170 are grown on a commercial scale. But inside the US though, there's only 30 plant species that we're regularly eating, but that 30, there's only 3 comprise our daily food intake here in the United States. Rice, wheat, and maize/corn. And that's probably why what we try to focus on is probably native plants. And this right here is going to be basically just a few are native plants that we have on 2 acres that either growing wild or stuff that we have planted. This here is common boneset. Boneset has been historically used by indigenous people to basically heal fractured broken bones. And also was used in the 1800s for people who had a bone-chilling cough. And then boneset too is something that could be grown in both moist places as well as some dry lands too as well. And also attracts different pollinators, bees, wasps, and butterflies. The reason why the attraction of pollinators is so important is that most of the foods that we do consume today have to be pollinated. Also too, in particular for squash family, they have to be pollinated before 8:30 in the morning. And the more diversity you have for your plants, whether it's fruit trees, it's nut trees, or even just flowering plants, the better chances of them growing us too, the bigger they become too. But more times that something pollinates it, the bigger that fruit become.
And then one quick story about boneset. Hurt myself back in May. I fell through a ceiling while putting some blocks up to stabilize a fan. I took boneset because Obiora suggested that to me to heal my lungs. So that also is very useful for that as well.
In goldenrod, there are 30 species of goldenrod indigenous to Kentucky alone, 250 to North America. And goldenrod, I can't remember the species of it though, it's a state flower for Kentucky. Goldenrod, the leaves are edible as well as to the flowers. And we do make goldenrod jelly. Also, white flower jelly contains goldenrod. And goldenrod is good for your lungs, for upper respiratory system, as well as to allergies too in the fall. This here is sassafras. Sassafras is a pretty common tree. The roots has historically been used for what's called root beer or roots beer. Depends on how many roots were in there. And then, but the FDA said because it contains saffron, it had to be banned from use of roots beer, even though cloves and a few other spices too are common have saffron in it too as well. And attracts pollinators too, and also with leaves of sassafras, they can be eaten. The leaves are basically what's used in gumbo. It is the filet in gumbo. This here is one of the sumacs that we have on the 2 acres. It's very smooth sumac. The fruit itself is edible, grows up to vitamin C as well. It attracts butterflies, moths, birds, and it's also been used for healing though in the past and today. And it's also used in smooth sumac jelly, also white flower jelly too. And the fruit itself can be used for something called a sumac lemonade or sumac aid. It has kind of a citric a flavor to it.
And sumac too, if you eat Mediterranean food or whatever, the sumac is a red you see. I used to think it was paprika, but actually it's sumac.
This here is Wayne the dwarf sumac. Again, has the same properties as smooth sumac. This here is elderberry. Elderberry is a indigenous plant too as well. It likes moist to dry soils, and it attracts pollinators. And then when it ripens, the fruit, as well as the flowers too, before the fruit gets set, are both used for healing too. This here is wild blackberry. It's a good source of vitamin C too as well, magnesium, also other things too. And also with blackberries, the reason why we have it on here, other things too, is that that's something we do sell as produce too as well on our 2 acres. This right here is tulip poplar. Tulip poplar has been used for different types of drinks as well as the bees do like the pollen right there, and that's something that sometimes too can be tasted inside of honey also. Shagbark hickory, alluded to Lisa earlier, is about used for making the hickory syrup. I take the bark of shagbark hickory, I roast it out there in the oven for about 30 minutes to kind of get the hickory smell, and then I make a tea with it. Then with the tea, I either ferment it for anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks, or I just make a simple syrup though, and then that gets bottled. And with the shagbark hickory too, a lot of people talk about trying to find different ways of creating products though that are niche, that also too not hurting the trees. What happens with shadowbark hickory is that it loses its bark every year, like basically a snake shedding its skin. So every March I go to the forest, I harvest basically following the previous fall.
These are the acknowledgements for the aerial map and for the other map of Kentucky that I created. And so basically everything I did was done all in QGIS. Okay, before we finally finish up, for anyone that lives in Western Kentucky, I have a survey that I created. Actually, it's two surveys that I created. You can find it from my website there, or I have the direct link here. So if you don't mind, come up here and get that after we finish. And the survey is basically about activities to do in Western Kentucky, as well as creating interest for things like a buying club, where we come together and buy things in bulk. So any questions for us?
Not really, no.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Is this experiment? Is this an experiment for your family trying to reconnect with your ancestry? Is it commercial? Is it just fun? Or I don't see that you've done anything really that was commercial, but it sounds very interesting from the standpoint of your cultural history.
It's multifaceted in the sense that some of my brothers have mentioned to me, but Jeff Poppin, River Farmer out of Nashville, Tennessee, says that all agriculture is experiment. So yes, what we're doing is experiment. Every time you kind of go out to nature, you can never control nature, so you always kind of base it on the whim of nature. Also, and two, more importantly, we're also learning. So that part of it, yes, is experiment. Also, too, I worked in a laboratory as an engineer years ago in a controlled environment, though. And so that's different from, of course, being outside nature. We have deer to contend to, and that's part of the reason why we have some of the, I guess, losses that we do have, because the food sources for deer in that particular region is almost non-existent. And as far as being, second part of your question, we started actually selling products in 2018. Right there, we kind of tossed and turned about selling products, though haven't really done anything. Since 2018, I've been primary person selling products. I do jams, jellies, syrups, calendars, puzzles, posters. What else? Seeds. I sell native seeds too as well, and also I make too with other variety products too. I do baked goods. Hot sauce, salsa. I've done pop-up preserves too. I've done a wide variety of things on stuff, basically trying to utilize what we have growing on 2 acres, primarily.
Is it for your consumption?
No, it's something I sell. I do a farmer's market in Millville, part-time. I started that last year. I used to do for Brickstone Farm, this is Deborah Hill right here. We used to do a farmer's market in Franklin County from 2016 to 2019 in person, and she allowed me to sell stuff there too as well for those 3 years. And also too, we have a website. People can buy stuff from me there. We've done events at the farm. We sell stuff at. And now, most of I do sell is through word of mouth. People I do know or don't know. And also, we had farm event on the farm last year. It was our first table of farm dinner. We had 8 people there. One person was supposed to come from Pennsylvania. And so we're definitely doing different things to try to increase the income for ourselves. And this is definitely a different venture from the family farm itself. We didn't mention this, but the family farm is owned by a corporation my family started in 1986. I'm sorry, 1984. They actually own the Martin Acres. We're leasing 2 acres though for Martin Acres for something we're doing stuff, because the family farm itself has not done anything as far as heavy agriculture since 1986. That's when the last of the hogs. So before there was a fully diversified farm. We had their hogs, ducks, sheep, goats, geese, cows, horses, donkeys. We grew tobacco, hemp for World War II, strawberries, corn, and I think probably about 20 other things too, but there's also too. When the family still actually living there. My grandmother moved away from the farm when she was in college, and she was the third oldest. My great-grandfather had 18 children, and so of course then, that was when it still wasn't a fully operational farm.
And one thing I'll add too is that we are weekend farmers. I live in Nashville, Tennessee. He lives in Lexington, Kentucky. And so we're up there on the weekends to farm. And what we're doing is basically, like I said, it's very eclectic, but like I said, it's valuable. We have products that we're selling that people enjoy. Like Lisa, for example. So it's about really, in a sense, forging a new pathway of saying, this can be done differently than it has been done in the past today, but really, like I said, it showed earlier what it used to be done, where it's multifunctional. Like a good ecosystem has different functions of the high level, the low level.
And that's part two, what we're trying to do is trying to figure out a way to diversify what we have there. Because we know that the past is not working, having monoculture cash crops. That started because basically, a lot of it really started in Deep South because basically the enslavement of basically our people hundreds of years ago. And so that kind of still continues today. People have basically really, really vast farms where they go 1 or 2 crops. And part of the reason it's such a big deal is because last 3 years, we've had severe drought stuff here in Kentucky, part of the rest of the Southeast. So in doing so, I pass by a lot of farms as I travel across the state, or Commonwealth rather, I see after drought though, most things they have though are dying or dead. But last year though too, we had a reunion every Labor Day weekend. The corn pretty much that they were growing was all dead. But then you start 2 acres though, you see the yellows, the reds, the oranges, the greens, because again, life's still happening there. And that's part of what we're trying to do too, is try to teach people how to diversify what they have. So that way, if one crop fails, you don't lose everything. Think about the potato famine on stuff, 1800s. What happened in the Irish, the Irish and potato famine in 1800s. They also had the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma too, 1800s also too, for the same reason too. People are destroying the soil.
I'm so sorry to shut the conversation down here. We are out of time. Let's say thanks to Irucka and Obiora.